I know what my parent did, but I still can't think of them as abusive. But contradiction isn't necessarily evidence that an experience is fabricated. It may be part of the overwhelming experience that has and how it's been organized for the person. So if we then zoom out and we look at society, how it also holds incompatible realities as it relates to specifically protecting children from the kind of abuse that these conditions are rooted in. So on one side, we have the individual survivor. On the other side, we have society. And we want to kind of notice the parallels. So society knows, we all know that childhood abuse exists. Childhood sexual abuse exists. Childhood neglect exists. Domestic violence exists. Trafficking and exploitation exists. And that children are harmed within families and institution. We know that these conditions of living, these contexts, do also have lifelong consequences. But none of this information is hidden from us, and yet we routinely underestimate prevalence. Survivors are questioned about the reality of their memory and the reality of what happened. Children are often not believed. Children are often sent back to their abusive homes once they've been removed. Severe psychological consequences also can be treated as implausible. Dissociative disorders themselves have historically been met with skepticism and controversy. So collectively, we can hold that terrible things do happen to children alongside, surely that much couldn't have happened to you. That's the parallel. So just like individuals, culturally and socially, we compartmentalize cause and consequence. We acknowledge that childhood trauma exists while we distance ourselves from its consequences. We may be more comfortable acknowledging maybe mood conditions like anxiety or depression or low self-esteem, etc. But the more profound consequences of developmental trauma can become harder for people to really tolerate and therefore believe and fully acknowledge the reality of their existence. Um, and that is where perhaps we begin to doubt severe dissociation or amnesia or fragmentation of identity or the existence of DID or OSDD. We may doubt the consequences of profound attachment disturbance and the consequences that these things have on people throughout their lifespan. So, how can we accept the magnitude of what happens to some children while simultaneously being surprised by the magnitude of their adaptations? We acknowledge the atrocity, and then we question whether the psychological consequences could really be that severe. And also, there is a social habit of minimizing the atrocity or the extent of it as well. So, individual denial and collective denial can reinforce each other. On an individual level, we have trauma, which leads to dissociation, uncertainty, self-doubt, and minimization. This is part of the experience of structural dissociation on an individual level. On a collective level, we have abuse, we have discomfort with its existence, therefore we minimize it, turn our head away. We don't believe that somebody who perpetrated the abuse actually did it because it seems implausible since we've known them, etc. Um, so these, and then that perpetuates this sort of inadequate response around prevention and also ensuring that those who perpetrate abuse are held accountable. These processes meet then. The survivor already questions themselves. They encounter a culture that also questions them, and maybe even some might argue punishes. Then there's this internal uncertainty around uh, memory and whatnot that encounters the external uncertainty. And internal minimization then encounters cultural minimization. That can reinforce then the survivor's original adaptation. Maybe it really wasn't that bad. Maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe I made it up. Maybe I shouldn't talk about this. There's something really particularly painful about a survivor developing dissociation, partly because their reality was unbearable, and then encountering a society that also struggles to tolerate, accept, and believe that reality.